All right, I'm going to do a quick sharpening video. If you guys know how to sharpen, just scroll on. I'm going to show you how I do it. I hand sharpen everything out to 56 on my rip chains. See those are all mill saws up there. The one with the black is brand new, so I don't have a big bar on it yet. But doing a little firewood cutting today, so I'm going to touch up a chain. Figured why not. And I'm going to explain a couple things and show you how I do it, and I'll show you some alternatives too for those of you who struggle with sharpening and so on and so forth. So I'm going to try to get you set up, see if this will work right on top of the saw right here. And if it does, then this should be cool. So this is full comp semi chisel. It's actually steel chain, and it's still pretty sharp. It doesn't have a lot of hours on it, but I'm just going to run across it because I saw a couple of nicks. Like, see if I can get some of these in frame. There's a focus, or as AV would say, focus, you fuck. Can't tell if it's going to focus or not, but it's kind of a little bit of a ding on the corner right here. Now, good thing about semi-chisel is it'll still cut like that, where you ding the corner on full chisel and it'll stop cutting. A couple things about tooth geometry. Got something here. Sorry, I'm bouncing around. You guys are gonna have to live with it. So I know that there's from the customers that I sharpen for, even professionals don't understand this, but the distance between the top of these teeth and that drag, raker, depth gauge, whatever you want to call it, I was taught drag, so I call them drags, is the thickness of the chip that you're going to take with this chain. Now, I take my teeth down with a progressive raker gauge, and this is what it looks like. And this is the, you can see I mainly use the hardwood setting, which is right here. Goes on top like this, and the raker sits right up, raker drag, depth gauge sits right up through that hole. You just get it right in that slot right there. File it off flush. I don't know if you can see, but this one's actually pretty flush. So it looks like they're I can see just dig across there, but I can see just a hair of the raker coming across the top. So these are probably going to get their, it's not their first touch up, just looking at them. They've been hit before, but it's pretty close. So they'll get a touch up afterwards. But the thing about using this gauge is that it sets the raker to the individual tooth. So if when you get filing, you get wonky and you get one side shorter than the other, or if you hit a big chunk of metal with this tooth and you want to just sharpen this one and don't take everything else on the whole chain down, if you have teeth of different sizes and you set the raker to each tooth, your saw will still cut straight. Versus using one of these, or actually my other one's in the inside shop where my grinder is, but the other one, these set across the top of the teeth and then use either the 25 thou or the 30 thousandths hole here to take these down. A couple things about them: if you look across this one, you grind them down so they become wonky and you end up taking too much off anyway. The other thing is that it sets the rakers to the height between these two teeth, and if this tooth was real short, this raker would come down a mile. So you really don't want that either. And actually this one will bridge like four or five teeth. So the progressive gauge is way better. It's what I use. They look like this. You can get them from Husqvarna, you can get them from Bailey's. This is what a Husqvarna one looks like, and it works exactly the same way. Sets on top, and I'm just trying to look through the camera while I do this, so I apologize, but you get the raker set right in that hole like that, and then file across. But actually this one's so thin now from filing a lot on it, it's kind of flimsy, so it bends, so I don't use it anymore. But I'm gonna get this set up here, see if this will look right down the chain for me. This is like fucking Billy Ray Smith style here. Yeah, it's not too bad. So if this will stay here, this will be cool. So what I do is, I'll blacken a tooth, or red or whatever. I got, Sharpies all over the place. And there is a witness mark on these, but you're kind of fine, unless you're real used to doing this like I am, you're kind of far away from that witness mark to match up your angle. And if I was doing it, depends on this file sits in my toolbox. This file sits in my sharpening kit. So when I'm doing it, see how far up the chain you can see. Nope, you can't see high enough. Let me just move you up a little bit. Let's see if I can do it right here. So I match the angle, hold on the end. And that's pretty much it. This tooth is like a razor. I can see the burr starting to burr over on the top right here. See, let me get you back down for a second. See the hook angle on it. Go on the back side because you can't see it good from that side. So this tooth right here. This tooth right here. It's actually got quite a bit of hook in it. So get some of that black off there. It's going to be a little aggressive, but it's not too bad. If you get too much hook, what'll happen is that you'll wipe out the edge really fast because the edge becomes very thin. When the top curves a lot like that, the edge of the cutter is very, very thin, and you wipe it out kind of fast. So you don't want that much hook. On geometry on these. See again, I'm trying to get you set up so I can explain something, because again, from sharpening for customers, everybody says they understand and they're the best, but they don't. So let's see if I can explain some of this. On this tooth right here, for this tooth to cut, the highest point on the chain, the very, very highest point, right here on the outside edge, the working corner, you call it, that point right there has got to be sharp. It's going to be square across the top and sharp for this chain to cut. If this gets rounded over so that the leading edge of the tooth is lower than the top of the chain, it's going to ride through the wood and it's not going to cut good, especially on full chisel. It won't cut almost at all. So the highest point of the tooth has to be flat on the top, and there has to be a cutting edge on the highest point. If this is rounded off, you've got to file it back. And then also the distance from the top of this to this is going to give you the thickness of the chip that this takes. The more you take these down, the thicker the chip you take, the faster it'll cut. The problem is if you don't have a lot of power, this saw does. If you don't have a lot of power, it'll bog your saw down. So if your saw gets boggy, you can always sharpen it a couple times and not touch these and see what happens. And sometimes that will that'll give you better revs. But I'm going to go ahead and file a couple, and I'm going to show you. Actually, I'm going to get right to filing angles. You're good. There's basically 3 angles that I file at. There is 25 degrees, which I believe these are. There's 30 degrees, which I find is a little bit too aggressive. I'm not running race chains, and maybe if you were cutting a lot of softwood and you wanted them to really dig, you could use that. But 30 degrees just dulls too fast, and the crap that I cut in the hardwood and dirty timber and everything else. And then there's 10 degrees that I use on my rip chains. How you're going to, the angle isn't super critical. They can be off a couple degrees each way. It's not going to matter at all to how your chain cuts, as long as it's sharp and that highest point on the tooth is sharp. You can get yourself one of these. They have all the angles on them. The reason that I have this one is it's got a 10 degree on it. And I keep one for left and one for right. But basically what you do is you line up the line here with the edge of your bar, and it tells you, and then file across, and it will file it at that degree. So that's 10 degrees. That one's 25. And I can't see down through there, but it feels like it's right. And then there's a 30 on there too. I keep two of these. There's a left and a right for when I'm filing my rip chains if I ever want to get back to perfect degrees. So this one actually has the 10 degree going the other way. Yeah. So there's the 10 degree the other way. All right, so you can use these if you want. When I first started out filing rip chains, I would use these about every third or fourth filing. So I'd do it by hand 3 or 4 times and then use these to get my angle back to 10 degrees. It's the only time I ever use these is on rip chains. And what I do on these, because you're only wiping one spot on the file, is after I file a couple times, I'll take the Sharpie and put a little red dot on the edge, the part of the file that's being used, and then rotate it, and then keep going until there's dots all the way around, and then I'll take this and it'll just become a hand file. But let's see if I can do this without moving. How far up can I go here? Nope. Gotta get you up a little bit. I'm just gonna do a couple of teeth. Sorry about the freaking mess here. I get you right on top of the saw, and it's not easy. Okay, I'm just gonna do a few teeth here. Show you how fast it goes. So I hold both sides. You don't want to file on the backstroke. I kind of turn the file on the 3-stroke like this and just follow at 25 degrees. And I can see on the top of the tooth. Make sure you see because you're on. Let me go around the other side and film it while you're doing it. Yeah, actually, yeah, that's good. So I follow my angle. And once you get your hands kind of in the right angle, I can kind of keep them there. This file's a little dull. You don't have to count your strokes. You can if you want to. Sometimes when I get in a rhythm, I count them just for rhythm. 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One across the top. 1, 2, 3. This one needs a little more. And I am not filing. I know it sounds like it, but I'm not filing on the backstroke. It's just coming back like that. If these were a little duller, I'd take a couple of passes across with just a teeny little bit of up pressure to set my angle. So sometimes if I'm reprofiling a tooth, I'll go through, sharpen out the gullet here, get the whole tooth basically sharp, and then just to set my angle, if you use this a little up pressure, just make like 2 or 3 swipes right across the top of the tooth to set my angle and get that tooth angle nice and straight. And, I mean the cutter edge on it. This is a 72 drive link chain. Probably take me, without filming and everything, probably just maybe 2 or 3 minutes to file the whole chain, unless I had to reprofile it, which then it would take me longer. If you have just a little nick in the top corner like this one does, but the rest of the tooth is in really good shape and you don't want to file that whole tooth back, you can set a lot of down angle on the file and just file that top corner like that. That makes that top corner sharp now. And then just a couple of swipes across the top of the tooth to set the angle back. Like that, that's perfect. If there's a lot of damage on the top of the tooth, you can kind of file, just concentrate your pressure on the upside to just work the cutting edge. These teeth are in pretty good shape though. Those last couple strokes are just right across the top of the tooth. Also, this file right here, I think it's a Husqvarna. I think it's a Husqvarna file. It says made in Sweden, so I think it is. This has got a 25 and a 30-degree angle on this file. So you can set it on the 25 against the side of the bar like this, and it'll show you what the right angle is for that tooth. And as you can see, can you look straight down on this, Tommy? You can see that even though I'm just doing it by eye, I got that one pretty much dead on. So there's a 25 degrees, and if you hold it against the bar, so that's a good way to do it too. If you get one of these, you hold it against the bar, that sets your angle, and then just swipe across. The only thing I'll tell you is if you do it like that, and this side's done. If you do it like that, you're gonna want to twist your file, because if you just go straight across like this, you're only gonna be working at one spot in the file, and you'll dull them pretty quick. I just clean them out like this, tap them, pull them backwards. When I do the other side, if I'm at home like this and I can work in the vise, I work from the front. So I can set my 25 on there like that if you feel so inclined to use it. Make my last couple across the top. Check my angle. That one, as you can see, can you see that, Tommy, right there? So you want to make sure that, you know, there's a, I don't know if it's a third or so of your files above the tooth is perfect for hook, and that your cutting edge is on the file all the way across when you're done. Because when I start, like right now, there's a gap here. So I'm going to file it back. Now if you look, the tooth's against the file the whole way across. So I've hit the whole cutting edge. And you can see, get down here, Tommy, and show so you can see the hook on the tooth down here. So you can see the hook on the tooth. Still got a pretty good hook. I could take a little bit off the tops, but since it's a firewood saw, I'm going to keep it. You get in a rhythm, you can kind of just keep your arms at the same angle. If you want to check yourself, you set it against the chain, see where you are. I'm at the right angle the whole time.
Oh, remind me to go up.
You can kind of tell too, the way I was taught the file was that if the file's not smooth going in the tooth, if it's catching, you got a burr, and that's what you need to get rid of. So I'll get that tooth came out. So you can kind of feel when there's a burr in there. Yep. You can also feel when the angle of the tooth's off a little bit. Perfect. Angle on this one's actually off just a little bit. It's a little bit too acute. It's closer to 28, 29. But like I said, if I'm just filing through this chain, I'm not even really paying attention to those angles. It's not any big deal to have teeth that are 26, 27, 28, 24. It's not going to matter when you're cutting it off. What's going to matter is that working edge is sharp. If you're milling, the gullet really needs to be sharp, because that gives you your smoothness on your wood, and that these drags are set the right height from the top. That's the most important thing about cutting, period. And that the drags are all set a consistent distance from the top. What gives you crooked cuts is when your drags on one side are set lower in relation to the top of the tooth than the drags on the other side. That's what gives you crooked cuts. Or that your gullets aren't sharp on one side. Like if you're milling and you hit a nail and it only hits one side of the chain, like on the bottom, and you wipe out the gullets on one side but the other gullets on the other side are sharp, chain's not going to cut straight. two gullets a little low. I'm just going to work the top of that one a little bit. Beautiful. Last one's the 72 drive link chain with filming. And just to set the angle, just a little bit of up pressure and then just real easy right on the top cutting edge. Nice and 25 degrees. So that chain's done as far as sharp goes, and then I got to go around and do the gullets. I mean the drags. So I do them the same way. I start with this one. I typically set all my drags to hardwood setting all the time, so I never know when I'm going to be cutting. And if this chain's not exactly tight, if it's tight, what I'll do is I'll do from here to as far back as I can fit this in, so to here, and then rotate it and do the same thing all the way around. I'll do both sides from one side. Just when you do the teeth that are closest to you, it'll chatter a little bit. So what you're going to want to do is just go at an angle like that. And these are actually really close. This will only take a second. And it's good that it's cutting each one, because that means when I'm done, everything's going to be set perfect, so that this chain will cut perfectly straight. Because every drag is set to the individual tooth, and they'll all be the same height. If you don't have one of these gauges and you have trouble with your chains cutting crooked, get one. Don't you gotta go? 3 to 6. I'm using the front of the file right now just because, you know, when you do the big chains like my milling chains, it wipes these things out, so you end up with a bunch of dull spots on your files. Hardest thing in the world is to find good files to do this. The other thing that this gauge does too is, I don't know if Tommy can see this, but on your drags, it gives you good angle. It angles your drags down. It doesn't make them flat across the top, and they'll cut a lot smoother with that down as opposed to flat. The reason for the progressive gauge is that, from a geometry standpoint, as these teeth get really short, the standard 25 thousandths or 30 thousandths on the rakers doesn't work anymore. What this does is this progressively takes them down, and when these teeth get really, really short, these rakers will be down like 40 thousandths, 45 thousandths, and it'll still be taking a small chip, or a, you know, not too big a chip for the chain. That's what this really, what this was designed for, was to solve the geometry problem of the teeth getting shorter and the rakers needing to come down. The distance between the tooth and the raker increases, and the geometry changes. And when you use a standard gauge and you only take them down like 25 thousandths from the top, when the raker's really far away, it doesn't really work well. This works real well, and it rounds the raker off towards the front too. I'm going to show you another trick when I'm done here to keep your angles right, and how I file, part of my business, I restore old tools, and I'm a joiner. I work a lot with hand tools, and I restore old hand saws and sharpen hand saws too. Panel saws, old Distons. And I'm going to show you an old shipwright trick for doing your angles and what the old shipwrights are. This chain's done. Rakers are all done. So, this is an old shipwright trick. What the shipwrights used to do is they would put tape, or they would mark marks on their bench So as they were filing their teeth on their panel saws and their hand saws, they could hold the file close to that line as a visual aid to see the angle as they went down. And they make a whole bunch of lines at, let's just say you were sharpening at 20 degrees, which is a pretty standard middle of the road degree on a tooth, on a handsaw for cross cutting. They'd have a whole bunch of 20-degree lines on the bench on both sides. And then when they held their file, they could look down and make sure the file was in line with a line, and then they just filed and they just went down the chain. You can do the same thing with the chainsaw chain too. So if you want to do 25, I can line up my 25 with like a magnet like this, make a mark on it, do the same thing on the other side, probably see how it's going to work. Line up my 25 with the front edge, take a mark on it. You could stick this on your bar right over your vise like that. So then when you come over, set your tooth up right near it, and you could line your, your file up with the, look straight down on top, Tom. You can line your file up with the 25-degree line, and then just file. You hit your 25 degrees and go to the next one. 25 degrees, go to the next one. You could do it like that. You could use a big, a big magnet like this too if you want. Just stick it to both sides. When you go to do the other side, just flip the magnet over. Oh, no, you'd have to make sure you get the line the right way. That line's not the right way. But you know what I mean. You put a line on both sides. You could even put 2 or 3 lines so you could line the tooth up easier. If you want to use a bevel gauge or a protractor or whatever you want to put the lines on there, you can. I can just use this and set the 25-degree line parallel to that front edge, and then just make a mark across the face of that. That's 25 degrees right there. And then just set it on here, and you'd have that reference mark. So you can do it that way too. If you're out in the woods, you're not doing any of that. You're just filing them now. I would hope that out in the woods, you're just doing basic maintenance filing. So you're just filing the tooth sharp. You're doing it any way you can, whether you lay down on top of it like this and file like this. And you can actually, most guys that do this a lot will do it both directions and go through, kick it, and file it at 25 and they're 25 like this. However you can get set up out in the woods. But out in the woods, you're just trying to get yourself back cut, and you're not trying to put your chain back to perfect, which is here, since I can, I'm out as well. So I'm trying to make this chain 25 degrees, all the raker set, and this one's done. One final thing before I finish. This is a 325 chain on this little clone here. This calls for like a 5/16 file. I file everything except the smallest dinky. If a customer brings me a little electric saw or a pole saw or something like that with little dinky teeth, then I'm going to go ahead and grab my smallest files. But for anything that's a big size tooth, I use a 7/32 file. So I'll use it on this too. It calls for a 5/32. I file this exactly the same way as my big 3/8 chains. This. Shit's coming loose. Gonna call me a liar. Now, let me see that camera for 1 second. I'm not sure if you can see that. Oh, there we go. The one I just hit. Try and get it in focus there. Is this one? Where my camera is looking from here. See if I get it in focus. Hey, come on, focus, focus. I don't know if you can see how good that tooth looks, but I was just cutting with this 15 minutes ago. I'll show you the hook angle on it too. So it's that tooth right there. the 7/32 on these smaller chains actually gives you a better hook angle. You know, most of the file stays above the tooth, and it gives you a really, really nice durable hook angle. That's a good hook angle right there. And because the file's so big, it really does a good job of filing the entire tooth, versus on the big chains, like, they're not big, but on these larger tooth chains, you kind of have to pay attention to the file. You can get too deep in the gullet and end up with, that one's actually not that bad. That's pretty good. But you can make this too deep in here and end up with too big a hook if you don't pay attention with the 7/32, which is what this chain calls for. So you do have to run some swipes across the top. Yeah, it's sharp. It's wicked sharp. On these smaller chains, you don't have to worry about that because it kind of rides along, as you can see, kind of rides along the tooth in there across the top of the tie straps and stuff, and you still get a lot of the file above the top of the tooth. So it creates a really neat little hook angle there. So, you know, you can file both these chains with 7/32 file. Like I said, I was just cutting with this chain. I filed it one time just before I finished up. I haven't touched the drag, so I'm going to do that now because I noticed that when I was just ripping a big log and it was cutting a little bit crooked, but these saws will tend to do that when you only got one set of dogs on them. But yeah, so that's it. I was out here messing and figured I'd do one on filing. File the rip chains exactly the same way. I use hardwood setting on my rip chains all the time too. It just cuts smoother that way. And plus, when I'm running a big bar like a 56-inch with a 660 or 100cc 660, 99 cc's, at the hardwood setting, which is a smaller distance between the top of the drag and the top of the tooth, the 660 will pull a 56-inch no problem at that setting. If I filed it down